Hello and welcome to Khan Smash, your one-stop shop for all things PlayStation. With the PS5 launch this week, or last week if you're in the States, I was feeling a little nostalgic and decided to talk about the biggest hit of the now last gen, yes, none other than The Last of Us Part 2. When playing again, I realised that it's really important to talk about why Abby's introduction is actually a master stroke and why this is so powerful to this game. In case you haven't noticed by now, this video will contain big time spoilers for The Last of Us 2, so if you haven't completed the game yet, subscribe so you don't forget about me and come revisit this video once you finish the game. Also, if you have completed the game, then subscribe anyway because we're on our way to 200 subs and a whopping 97% of viewers aren't subscribed. Back to the video. During the first act of the game, we are introduced to Abby and her friend Owen, and we are surprised to learn that she's actually a playable character. After this, we see that she's looking for someone, we don't know who, and she tries to find them herself, and where she's attacked by a horde of infected. This was super intense and was the first time we got to see hordes used in The Last of Us. It's actually at this point that we're saved by the series hero, Joel and his brother Tommy, and then we escape away back to Abby's hideout and everything is what are you doing? So, yes. Then Abby mercilessly kills Joel with the final blow coming in front of Ellie and then leaves town. After Joel's death, Tommy and Ellie set out for revenge along with Dina and Jesse, but they don't end up killing Abby but instead killing all her friends and a lot of other people on the way. They gave up as they realised they learned too much after Ellie killed a pregnant Mel, one of Abby's friends. At this point in the game we see Abby again as she appears looking for revenge after Ellie has killed her friends. She murders Jesse and has a gun to Tommy. Damn, things have gone bad. This is about halfway through the game and the player gets the next surprise. Swap. Now they get to play as Abby and go back in time 4 days to when Ellie started her rampage through Seattle. We then spend the next 40% of the game playing as Abby, trying to understand her journey and empathise with her, resulting in a heartbreaking fight where we, the player, try to kill Ellie, the hero, as the character who killed Joel. It's honestly the hardest part of any game ever. But as Abby, we fight her and unfortunately we have to win. Once the fight's over, Abby lets her live. We then transition back to Ellie, who's now settled down with Dina, and it's all great. But Ellie has to go back and find Abby and finish it once and for all. So the game ends after going through the most grueling area in the game, with Ellie and Abby fighting to the death. Or not really, because Ellie actually decides to let her and Lev live, but in doing so she decides to end the circle of violence and stop all the revenge. So I can hear you already asking, and I know people have asked this question a lot, but why did we have to play as Abby and why does this make sense? Well, I'll walk you through that today. So the answer is simple, to paint her redemption story for us. In the first game we saw Joel at the start as a loving father, only to see his daughter gunned down in front of us in one of the most touching scenes in video game history. We then transitioned to 20 years later and he became a ruthless smuggler who admitted that he'd been a hunter at some point in his life and done awful things that he wanted redemption for. With Abby, we've actually seen the events that haunt her, the killing of Joel in the way that she did. We begin to understand why she did what she did, and it does actually make sense. As much as I hate the outcome and I hate to admit this, honestly I really can't stand it, but Joel deserved death for his actions at the end of Last of Us 1. It was even worse because Joel just saved her life. And our whole plan was to get them back to the house and interrogate them to find out where Joel was. She just got lucky with the fact that it actually was Joel. As heartbreaking as that scene was, we had to live with it, and after we finished with Ellie we begin our stint as Abby to understand and empathise with her journey. At first she looks like a normal sweet girl, bringing things to her dad and looking through the door admiring him. We see her panic when the zebra is stuck in the barbed wire, and we see a hesitant Abby. After the death and we fast forward 4 years, you can see Abby committed to training and fully stacked, bruv. She's been prepping for that one day she gets to meet the man who wiped out a hospital full of fireflies, and mainly her father. We begin to understand and appreciate her struggle and her motivation. Although we don't agree with her, we see what she did and why. We also see the things she's done begin to haunt her. Although she doesn't explicitly admit it, she talks about how she needs to right her wrongs and how she needs to do things for her conscience. I.e., she needs to save Lev and Yara because she worries that by murdering Joel in cold blood, she's becoming like him and she needs redemption. This mirrors Joel in the first game as he realises that taking Ellie to the end is part of his redemption journey and helps him to actually settle and become a better person. Sidetracking to Joel for a second, this new and nice Joel is the one we see at the start of The Last of Us 2. A lot of people have said his death was out of character, but it's not when you think about it. It's highly unlikely that Joel of part 1 would have saved Abby. In fact, he would have definitely left her to die. Also, he wouldn't have been so welcoming to her friends when they met, and they wouldn't have gone into the house with their guard down. That said, Joel now lives in Jackson. He's taken his chance to warm as a character and grow into more of a loving individual with a heart for humanity. We saw in Jackson that they traded with strange groups on a regular basis, and you can imagine being in a family environment like that, Joel's hard heart has surely softened. Thankfully though, deep down Joel is still Joel, and when he knows his time is up he stays solid like a badass and tells Abby to just get it over with. In case you can't tell, I genuinely love Joel. And I was gutted when he died, but after having played it and having time to reflect on it, I do agree that he did deserve to die given his actions at the end of part 1. Instead, it's a testament to the writer staying grounded in the realism and inevitability of The Last of Us. Anyway, back to Abby. As her story progresses with Lev and Yara, we do actually begin to connect with her and her journey of redemption. But it's not easy, and this is done on purpose. The reason for this is because Druckmann wanted us to hate her like she hates herself for what she did, and the story wanted us to feel awkward when trying to relate to her, as Yara and Lev clearly felt when talking to her. At the end of the day, they really didn't want to trust a wolf, and they didn't really trust her for quite some time. Then for the remainder of the game, we actually play with either Yara or Lev as our sidekick, and it's very reminiscent of Joel and Ellie, and the way we played with Ellie in the first game. That said, I don't care how hard they tried, I couldn't connect with Abby, Lev or Yara anywhere near as much as I did with Ellie and Joel. Those two are irreplaceable. But as much as I couldn't relate to them, I really liked this approach because I genuinely had fun seeing Abby's story play out. She was pure brute strength like Joel, and I really did love her gameplay, especially as she has the bigger gameplay moments in the game, like the Rat King boss and the apartment block after the sky bridges on day 2. Like, damn, I hated that descent, but it was sick. That said, I must say I preferred playing as Ellie. Ellie was so much more faster and versatile, and bruv, she's Ellie! She's Ellie! So I had much more fun playing as Ellie and just being a general badass. Let's be honest though, from a gameplay perspective, no one was ever going to have any complaints. To sum up, this game is a story of two halves. One is a revenge story with Ellie as the protagonist, and one is a redemption story with Abby as the protagonist. The way they're intertwined is expertly done, and I thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it. Every aspect of the game shows us the harsh reality that is the world of The Last of Us. Everyone in this game is a villain, it just depends on which side of the gun you are. We saw this in the first game with David and his village. In their eyes, their friends were murdered by a madman and they wanted revenge on Ellie and Joel. This point wasn't so heavily shown in the first game, as frankly, people were more clearly good and bad. Even with David, they were still hunters and cannibals and their men did shoot first. But in part 2, we actually see much more remorse and a lot more grey area. Even looking at Whitney, the PS Vita player who Ellie killed in the hospital. As Ellie, she looked like a soldier who let a guard down and was trying to take down the enemy. But to Abby, she was an immature teenager who just loved playing video games and keep it to herself. It's actually really sad when you think about it. I feel like if I was stuck in a war zone like these characters are, I'd probably want to just duck out whenever I can to play on my games. So yes, this game did make you play as the killer of Joel, as the leak said, and that put people off the game, but you know what? The game showed you two sides to every story as well as a crash course in the hard reality of the post-apocalyptic realm of The Last of Us. Although I didn't love playing as Abby, I understood her in a way I never would have done before, and I'm so glad I got the chance to play this masterpiece. Anyway, that's everything for now. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think down in the comments. If you have a point of view, let me know, man. Hit me in the comments, bruv. I'm always happy to have a conversation. But if you like the video, do drop a like. And if you really like the video, do subscribe as we are on our way to 200 subscribers. See ya.